Chapter 13, Social and Personality Development in Middle Childhood. We've talked about Erikson's psychosocial stages. We talked about trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, and initiative versus guilt. Now we're talking about middle childhood, and we're talking about the industry versus inferiority stage. This is your elementary school years, 6 to 12. And we're having a shift at this time from where our parents and primary caregivers were the people we spent most of our time with. Now we're dealing with a lot more where we've got teachers and school and peers that are having more impact than they've ever had before. So according to this theory, if we come through this stage successfully, we start to feel a mastery, a sense of things that we're good at and competence. Whereas if we don't come through this with quite such a positive result, it's more of a feeling of failure and inadequacy. During this period of time, we have a lot of academic issues going on. We've got our different, math, science, social studies, reading and writing. We've got after-school activities and sports, and there's a lot of different areas we may find that we're good at some things and not good at others. And hopefully we come through that with a balance and a good sense of ourselves. During this time, we start to shift from thinking about our external characteristics and how we might describe ourselves as, oh, I'm a fast runner and things like that, to more internal, more psychological, and we start to have a lot more of a complex view of ourselves. We have a desire to compare ourselves. Social comparison is how we compare ourselves in our abilities, our expertise, and to figure out what we're good at, and we compare ourselves to others. Festinger said that when objective measures are absent, that people rely on our social reality. It's how others think or act or feel or view about the world, and it's how we evaluate ourselves. I always think that our perception is our reality, so sometimes if what other people think impacts us, it can have an impact on what we think of ourselves, and we might even just thinking other people think things about us can make us feel that way about ourselves. Social reality is how we understand how others act and think and feel and view the world, and also when we think about how they view us. To protect our self-esteem, especially as children, we often use downward social comparison, and that is kind of more likely that we're going to compare ourselves to people who don't do as well as we do. Although we often, when we talk about social comparison, if you think about how you do on a quiz or a test, and maybe you turn to your neighbors to kind of see how the people sitting around you, how they did, and we hope that we did better than they did, and that can be whether it be academic or social or in sports. It can cross all boundaries. Our development of self has 4 domains. We have our academic, our social, our emotional, and our physical. These are our different areas of self-concepts, and so they look at the different areas that we might have high or low self-esteem and how we might feel about ourselves. Having low self-esteem and actually talking about what is self-esteem, it's your positive and negative self-evaluation, how you feel about yourself. And so our stability and self-esteem can shift. Usually kids in elementary school have fairly high self-esteem. Around age 12, for many children, there can be a temporary dip. Most kids, they tend to go back up. There can be a cycle of failure, though. And actually girls tend to have a harder time pulling back out of the self-esteem around that age in early adolescence than boys. But most kids don't have too much trouble coming out of it. But what can happen is, for low self-esteem, you have low self-esteem, then you have low expectations for yourself, so you don't try as hard and you're anxious, and then you have failure, and then it comes around and repeats. The cycle of success works the same in a similar way. You do well, you have high self-esteem, you set high expectations for yourself, you try harder, you have less anxiety, and you succeed, and it creates a cycle. It seemed through a lot of research that white children had higher self-esteem, but what they found was that at the beginning of adolescence, black children tended to have a higher sense of self and self-esteem. There's definitely differences across different cultures and different races, and there's a chunk on that on page 332. You'll also find, when we talk about racial dissonance, there's a picture on page 332 of an African-American child, and she's got a black doll and a white doll. And so some research does show, as was talked about in the previous chapter, that there can often be that racial dissonance or that preference for the majority culture as what is considered most acceptable. Friendships. It's very interesting when it comes to friendship. Children are more likely to pick children of the same sex and the same race as themselves. but they're more likely to cross boundaries of race before they would cross boundaries of sex. So if you have a Caucasian female, she's more likely to play with an African American female than a Caucasian male. And here's that picture I was talking about from page 332 with the doll. The stages of friendship, according to William Damon, and this is a piece I found from Educational Psychology, but this is also talked about in your book on page 334. When we're little, up to age 4 to 7, we look at how other people behave. And you might choose to be friends with somebody because they're there, they're handy, and they don't hit, and they're nice, and they share their toys. And that's a lot of what friendship is based on during that age of 4 to 7. In the ages of 8 to 10, that is the age of, or stage of, basing friendship on trust. And so when you break a child's trust at that age, it can be a really big deal. But there's a lot of keeping secrets, and it's important to not break trust. And there's a lot of exclusivity in friendships at that age as well. In the next stage, stage 3, basing friendship on psychological closeness, there's a lot more about loyalty and having things in common that might be reasons why you would be friends with somebody. So these are just a couple of different charts I found that kind of explain the different friendship relationships. Through same-sex groupings, this talks about in middle childhood, boys and girls are starting to have romantic overtones in their relationships, but it's more of very minimal. Children still during this stage, girls spend more time with girls, boys tend to spend more time with boys. This picture is in your book on page 338, and this is what I was talking about, with children being more likely to play with children of the same gender and sex than they would children of the opposite sex. And also the crossing of racial boundaries before the crossing of gender boundaries. What makes children popular? Well, these are lists of things people like to see, that children like in other people, and things they don't like. And so when you think about what makes someone popular, you might find some of these liked behaviors to be more likely in the kids you remember from when you were in school that you'd find in kids you'd want to be friends with, and the least liked behavior would probably be the less popular kids. Children tend to be drawn towards other children like themselves. So more popular children tend to form friendships with other kids who are more popular. They also tend to have more friends. Less popular children tend to have friends who are also less popular. Social competence are the skills that we have that help us be successful in a social setting. Popular children tend to be more likely to have higher social competence. Being able to solve social problems and realize if something's socially awkward and how to handle it, children who are more socially competent tend to have the ability to do that better than children who are unpopular. Being able to read facial expressions and body language is something that you'll find more likely to occur with popular children than unpopular children. Kind of how we solve social problems. Children who have a lot of friends tend to be much more capable of doing these things. Can you teach social competence is an interesting question. Having social skills classes for kids who maybe are on the spectrum or have Asperger's or are less popular, and having ways to teach them how to relate to other people and understand social cues, they definitely can train kids to do it. I don't think you'll have those children becoming the most popular kid in school, but you can definitely help them understand better how to relate to other people. Boys and girls seem to be very different in how they have friendships. Boys are more likely to have larger groups of friends than girls do. They're more likely to play in groups, where girls are more likely to play in pairs. Boys are also more likely to have dominance hierarchy, where there's higher status boys and lower status boys. And there'll often be a challenge. If somebody challenges one of the more popular, more alpha males, it can become almost not, whether or not it's a physical fight or not, but it can definitely be challenged, something that's challenged. Children's closest friendships tend to often be with other children of the same race. Contact between different members and can often help reduce prejudice and reduce discrimination, but we do tend to see, and I always think of jails and prison yards, you tend to see people cluster in racial, they'll be by table, same as often you'll find in cafeterias, middle school and high school cafeterias. Not always, but sometimes you'll find that those tables are actually very racially divided. Bullying. I think there's a group in your class doing a presentation on bullying, but bullying is a huge issue in today's society, as everybody knows. The incidences are, we now have cyberbullying, so people used to be safe if they went home, and now it's through your phone and your computer and social networking, and bullying can begin as early as preschool. It's starting younger and younger, although maybe it always has. During middle childhood, there's a period of co-regulation. So when we were younger, our parents were in charge of a lot of our decision making, and then when we get older and we're adults, we make most of our decisions. But this 10, 11, 12-year-old range is we think of as co-regulation because the parents and the children are jointly in control of what the children can do and of the children's behavior. When the parents work outside the home, how do kids do? Most research shows that it's really about the quality of time and not the quantity of time spent, so that if parents who work outside the home still spend a lot of time with, or when the time they spend with kids is quality time, that's really the most important piece. And that the other piece of it is that when the parents are happy, children are more likely to be happy too. So if a mom who works is going to be happier than being home, then she would make a better parent. When I was a kid, I was called a latchkey kid, but I guess there's a negative stigma to that now, and they're called self-care children. These are the kids who come home after school to an empty house, and there's some positives and negatives to it. I think some of the positives are that, if they have responsibilities and they learn that, you come home and you have chores and things to do, and it can give them a little bit of independence. Some of the negatives, I think, are that they may not have someone to talk to if they didn't have a great day at school, and they need someone to vent to, and now the parent doesn't come home until 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and by then they've internalized it. So there's definitely some positives and some negatives to it. This chart looks at from 1997, and then it looks at 1981, and it looks at how children spend their time. This chart's on page 341 in your book. And what you'll notice is sleeping and school definitely take up a lot of the time, but television, and I would think video games would fall into that as well. I think if we did a more recent study here, we would see that the television and media consumption piece would be pretty close, actually, to the amount of time they tend to spend in school, which is kind of scary. Divorce. The short and long-term consequences of divorce are different. The short term, up to about 2 years, there can be a lot of negative consequences. Most kids do tend to pop back to normal or where they were before the divorce emotionally about 2 years later, but there's definitely some fallout evidence that there can be long-term results. Children can get, especially boys, can often become more aggressive. Girls can often be more likely to internalize the divorce, where boys may be more likely to act out. Single-parent families, about 25% of children under the age of 18 live with only one parent. There can often be negative consequences financially because having one income instead of two can be a really big deal. And there can be more stress, and how much time a parent can spend with the children when there's only one parent in the home can be an issue as well. This chart looks at the increase in single-parent households from 1980 to the year 2009. Multi-generational households are on the rise, where the parents and the grandparents and the children are all living in the same house. There can be potential for conflict when there's more than one adult, more than two adults making decisions, but it can also be beneficial to all involved to share the responsibility. Blended families, this is where, when you think about the Brady Bunch, where there's kids from two different parents, families get divorced, and then two parents get remarried where they each have their own kids. It can be very ambiguous for a child to not know, maybe they were the baby of the family and now there's younger siblings, or they were the oldest, or there's now someone closer to their age that they have to treat in a sibling way that they're not used to doing. Families with gay and lesbian parents. Research is showing that the effects of same-sex parents are the same as the effects of opposite-sex parents on children. The only research that's at all slightly different is children with gay and lesbian parents sometimes tend to have more empathy, but otherwise their child rearing seems to be pretty much the same. Financially and economically disadvantaged children definitely have a lot of risks for poor academics, more aggression and conduct problems. There's definitely a correlation between socioeconomics and how that negatively impacts children. Group care in childhood, take a look at that section of the book. Characteristics for positive and negative child care situations, I'd also like to have you take a look at in the book. And this chart looks at what's positive and negative and that you'd want to see in a child care setting.